So we're talking about the subject of marketing, and we're going to talk about strategy. And before we talk about strategy, we need to think about why do we need to have strategies? We need to have strategies because they are part of that's sort of the direction that a company takes in order to um, perform and succeed to serve some opportunities. So this is defined in the marketing plan, and the marketing plan has several processes which are very common across countries and across cultures when you actually do some marketing. So in the marketing plan, you'll have a structure which is very formalized as being the mission, the objective, the strategy, then the plans. What would be the other word for plans?
Mission?
No, for the number 4 here, plans. So after the strategy, what do you have?
Implementation.
So yes, you implement, but what do you
Oh wait.
implement? What do you implement?
Ideas?
Not really. A strategy is a big thing. What's the smaller component of a strategy? What's the subcomponent of a strategy? It starts with a T. After the T is
Timelines?
Is it the tactic?
yes, it's the tactic.
Okay, thank you.
So the tactic is the same word as the actions, which is the same word as the plans, which is the same word as something else. So if I hope you don't forget everything that you will learn in this class. But if there's one thing you need to remember is what is marketing?
Satisfaction.
Satisfaction. That's the number one thing you need to remember. What is the other thing that every master student usually remember when they took a marketing class? What is the other thing that they remember about marketing? It's
Selling?
The 4 Ps.
the 4 Ps. Exactly. So that's the two very, very, very basic, but at least that's the two things you want to remember is marketing is about satisfying the customers at all costs to make some profit long term and deliver this satisfaction. And then the next thing is marketing is also the 4 Ps. And so it's product, price, promotion, and place. The 4 Ps are what goes inside the plans. So if I say what is the same word as plans is action, tactics, 4 Ps, plans. That's the same. So why do they have so many words for the same thing? Well, it just happened that way. It's not always that way, but in that situation, it is that way. So the the 4 Ps is what you implement. I remember this was Brian that says, the you implement. Yes, so you implement the 4 Ps. And why do you implement the 4 Ps? In order to, complete the strategy. And what's the point of the strategy is to reach your objectives. So this is just, it's extremely important to understand this how the things work together, the order of things, and what's the purpose of each one of them. So the mission is the reason why this company exists. So um, Delta Airline, why does it exist? Is to transport people in the air and make sure that people are safe and satisfied. What's the purpose of Macy's? Macy's is to deliver a quality and value product within the network of their online and physical stores. So it's a broad definition of what the company does. The best definition are the ones that do not state the product specifically, because the company should not be defining themselves as a product, but should be defining themselves as as a satisfaction that they serve. So they serve the satisfaction of transportation, they serve the satisfaction of having quality fashion goods, but not just shoes or. So you want to have a broad definition. The objectives they're better if they are measurable. So if you say we're going to increase sales, it's insufficient. You want to say we're going to increase sales by a certain percentage within a certain period of time. So if I say I want to increase sales in the USA, I don't know the percentage and I don't know the time. So now better is I want to increase sales by 5% in the USA in the next 12 months. Objectives, depending on the industry, are a year more or less. Some industries are industries that have to innovate all the time and often. Therefore, the strategies and objectives are going to be shorter, 6 months, a month. And then some other industries have to even innovate not as often, and therefore these can last much longer. Okay, so you have to think about one. It's like you have several saucepans, and it's like the first saucepan that you put in the drawer or in the cupboard is the biggest one, because then you have a medium that goes inside, then you have a small that goes inside the medium, and then you have a tiny that goes inside. So this idea of what's bigger and what's smaller is very, very important. What is the number 6 control? The number 6 control is the idea that when you develop a strategy, not only it's important to create strategies, but it's also important to constantly measure the effectiveness of your plans and the success of your plans. And how did they meet the objectives? When did they meet the objectives? And why do you do this feedback control? Is you do this because you want to monitor and maybe adjust as you go. The goal is to do well, and you cannot expect to do well every time and continuously. So you have to constantly monitor the progress of things and then readjust, because all of this is about making more money faster and being efficient. And to be efficient is you have to control. Okay. So, but before this is the big picture. The small picture is you have to identify decisions, small decisions, and sometimes bigger decisions, like what are the opportunities. So what's important here is this is how you will present the report. I talked about this on Saturday, and maybe even before that. That's how you will present the report. But this is not how you will present as a face-to-face, as a presentation. As a presentation, the concept to do a good presentation is to make a great sales. We talked about this last Saturday. So making a great sales does not have to have 6 slides, which each one of the slides goes in the order from 1 to 6, like here. The sales is very dependent on providing a solution to a problem and then giving the details on how this will work and why would it work. So it's an argument. So in that situation, you have to follow a different format. And here the format is going to really center on what are the outcomes of your research in terms of what are the problems the company is facing and what is the trends the market is going through, and what are the advantage that we can take out of these trends in order to grow the company to the next stage. So because it's about business, it's about taking risks, it's about taking leadership, it's about being innovative. So you have to do research. Okay, so the research, where do you do this research? So again, I don't want to spend too much time on this because this is a repetition, but it's so important, because it's just like a musician. Is before you play the music, you have a set of things that you're going to do in order to get yourself tuned and get yourself ready. And so running a business, there's a set of things that you need to understand, and that's what you need to understand is where do you find inspiration in your environment? What do you look in your environment? You look for opportunities and threats, but you also look for strengths and weaknesses. So that's your SWOT. Your SWOT is oftentimes people don't realize how difficult is the SWOT, because they just go through it as just a element that you would have in the report. But the reality is this is where you're going to really define where you're going to go. Well, you're going to define where are you now and where you're going to go and why and how you're going to go. That's the strategy if it's a high level, and how you're going to do it. It's the tactics if it's a lower level, which feeds inside the strategy. So the most difficult thing here are the opportunities, and that's why I've spent time with the team, mostly looking at defining the opportunities. What's interesting is, and it's pretty common, is that I've already met with 4 teams. The 4 teams have ended up with pretty much the same opportunities. Everybody has the same set of opportunities. So I'm not saying what they are, but everybody has very much understood what the opportunities were. So team 1, 2, 3, 4, but everybody has the same. And so people are correct so far. People have understood what they are, but they need to do more research in order to find opportunities which are um, less obvious and less supporting everybody who are. So, one opportunity that is obvious for everyone is like Latin music is Latin music market share and consumer interest is growing. So that's an opportunity. It's in the environment. Richie has nothing to do with it, and everybody can take advantage of it. And that's a little bit the problem, is it's not specific enough. I mean, if you are a big company with hundreds of millions of dollars, to define your opportunity like that, that may be fine because you will have the resources to go after the whole big pie. But when you're Alex Ritchie and you're coming, if someone gives you an opportunity which is so wide, you're going to lose yourself in this. So you're going to have to find a niche, a much smaller piece of that pie. So you looking for these more specific opportunities that would serve our clients. So the opportunity identification is not just looking in the market for the trends, looking at what the consumer wants. It's also has to be balanced with what the client can do, right? So the client has a set of skills, and obviously it's easier to match current opportunities with the existing set of skills of the client. However, you can always improve your skills. Some improvements may be easier achieved than others, and therefore that's what you have to do. Stages of development for the company, where the first stage will be less risky, require less resources, but with a smaller objectives, easier achievable objectives. But once these objectives are achieved, then you can move to the next objective, which are more ambitious. And then you go through the steps from less ambitious to more ambitious. And then you make the argument on even the ambitious. They're ambitious, but how ambitious are they? And how long do you give the clients to reach these ambitions? And what are the implementation that the clients need to do in order to get there? So that's what needs to happen. So in your environment, you look for all of this. And I gave you some example of this company that was making wine. Then they run into the situation of making canned wine. That's what makes them successful, just because this product at that time was people were ready to buy this type of product. It may not have been successful, even though it was an innovation 10 years earlier, but at that time, people were ready for this. I give you this example of the student that found that people forget, people have a bad memory, and therefore they don't know if they took their medicine, and then he created a cap that would actually record the last time that the medicine the container was open, and therefore he gave a very good solution for people who tend to be older and memorize even less, who takes the most pills. So when you look at your market, it's important that you understand how to define the size of your market and the size of the opportunity. So this is a question that students oftentimes ask. What is the size? So you have to look at the overall market. So let's say for Alex Ritchie, the overall market for people that would like um, Latin music. I don't know, what would it be? 40 million people in the US or something like this? I don't know, 30 million people. It's a big number. Then the total addressable market. So the total addressable market, maybe the TAM would be maybe just looking at California, maybe even Southern California to start. And there the TAM is, you find that it's, 2 million people or something like this, maybe more, probably, Latin music, 4 million people. But you find this from research, because you find the number of people that follow this genre of music, and you find in this territory. Then the sum, that's the one that is more difficult, because there's one element that I hope at least one person understand it per group right now, and eventually everybody will understand, because there is a percentage that you have to identify or argue for. So it's your sum multiplied by the percentage of penetration. So the percentage of penetration is your estimation of how much you think your client can garner the first year. So most of the time, this percentage is going to be small. Mostly when it's a singer like this with limited resources, at least it's going to be small the first year. This may change, but the first year will be small. So the percentage is, in this situation, will be based on some assumptions and estimations based on some data that you found that, so something maybe like a case study where you find that there was someone similar to Alex Ritchie, who started in 2020 to show their music, and let's say use TikTok and YouTube, and they were able to go from 600 views to 6,000 views per video or something like this. And so you will prorate this, and you would say, essentially, when you do TikTok, this many YouTube videos, this many things, you can expect to grow by 5% per month. And if it's 5% per month, we can estimate that 1.5, so it's equal to 200,000. And so 200,000 out of the 2 million that we say that we have in the SAM, that makes I don't know, 4%, and therefore you think that your sum is SAM multiplied by 4%. So you have to make an assumption, and so this percentage, Google is never going to give you the percentage of the penetration rate. You have to create that percentage by doing some research, by finding some data that are not connected, but once you connect this data together, it gives you the likelihood that you can succeed this. So another way is, if you see that a company is able to get 10% of market share by spending $10 million, then you figure that you should get at least the first year a third of this by also spending $10 million of advertising. Again, this is not written in Wikipedia or whatever, is you have to make this argument. You have to make a reasonable argument that if they get 10%, they have 10%. If with $10 million of advertising, if we spend $10 million of advertising, the first year we should also at least get 3%. And after 3 years, we will have 10%. And it's a question of making it making an argument that is not too much, too large. Because if you come up with a unrealistic number, so sometimes the number is very large and someone says, oh, that's not possible, and there's several people there, and one says, well, let's see how she wants to get this percentage. Let's hear her plans. Let's hear her 4Ps. And it's based on people's 4Ps that we can guess if their objective to get 3% of penetration rate is possible. So this is the part that is not very scientific in marketing. You have to make deductions on a set of things that you will do and a number of plans that other people have done, and based on what happened to them and what you're planning to do, you will make this deduction that this percentage penetration rate is acceptable. Okay, so you must have questions on this, because I always do. So tell me if do you have any questions. Any questions on, so where do you find information? Is by looking at what other people have done. So sometimes you may find businesses talking about their penetration rate and giving you the information, but it's in a different industry. So you can use that, but you have to explain us, convince us of why you expect the same penetration rate doing a set of activities, of plans, of actions, of tactics, of 4Ps that worked in a bakery industry. Why would that work for Alex Ritchie? So that's not the same thing. So that's why to really, there's two things. If the penetration rate is too big, people are very skeptical and they don't trust you. But then the next thing is, what do you plan to do? And what you're planning to do, does it make us feel confident? Is it reassuring that all of these things are going to work? So I don't know if I make myself very clear, but there is, it's not a pure science. There is an argument, and it's based on the argument that we can guess if what you're going to do is reasonable. Anyone has any questions? So when you look at the presentation, there is always a discussion on this penetration rate. So see if you can bring it up. What these past students have thought in terms of their penetration rate and how they explain the penetration rate. You know, there was a group who said that Matters should be sponsored by a headset, by a headphone, a video game headphone company. And so they looked at the number of people that played video games, the number of people that spend money on specifically on headsets. So this information was available. And then the number of people that also like this kind of vintage video game and music, you know, and they had some assumption of what it was. And then this, obviously the percentage of penetration rate is very dependent on the size of your SAM. The larger your SAM, the less likely that that number is going to be big for a startup, for like a young artist. So, you know, penetration rates are oftentimes in those numbers as well. So that's another thing. What's a reasonable number? You know, around 2%. So if you were to say 2% all your life, I think most people will not give you too much trouble, because that seems like the average, you know. Obviously, it's when people start giving big numbers like 4, 5, 6 that people go, okay, so that's a big number. What are you going to do? How much is that going to cost? Because you can get big percentage of penetration rate, but you're going to have to do a lot of marketing expenses. And so businesses are not too worried about having large marketing expenses if they have large returns as well. So you don't want to think that you're talking to an investor with a high penetration rate, and then you tell them about a lot of things they need to spend, that they're going to run away. Is they want to see what are the profits, and then get an idea of the likelihood that all of this is going to work. So that's why it is very important when, right now you may not have questions, but when we will meet again, starting up probably next week, you will have to be more advanced in the process of creating your presentation. And then we will talk about your presentation rate. And then I would ask you, how did you deduce this penetration rate? And then you give me your explanation. And oftentimes, this is when students have questions. And oftentimes, and always, this is when they understand what this is really about. So the best way to learn about this is to do it. Okay? Still no question on it? I'm just making sure. All right. So the rule of thumb is, where do you find information for your SWOT? So in the microenvironment, you're going to find mostly the information for the strengths and weaknesses. In the micro and macro and all of these factors, this is where you're going to find information on your opportunities. So your opportunities require you to be curious and look at all of the factors. The number one threat are competitors. So doing a competitor analysis is very, very important. I talked about this, and this is essentially where I stopped last Saturday, but your business plan is made of multiple plans, and all of this plan is what makes the business plan. The business plan itself doesn't exist. The business plan is a marketing plan plus an accounting plan plus the finance plans plus the HR plans plus a legal plan, and etc. So it's just a name of a combination of plans. So now I go back to my Russian doll again, because I was talking about this saucepan, the Russian doll. To run your plan, you need to understand that there's big things and small things. What's the big thing when you talk about the direction of your company? What's the long-term, what is the name for the long-term direction that you will implement in order to get your objective completed? It's called the strategy. What is the sub-component of the strategy called? It's called the tactics. So strategies and tactics are two different things. Let's talk about some strategies. So there's a simple matrix which is called the NSOF matrix. The NSOF matrix is the most talked, presented set of strategies that probably summarize 50% or more of the strategies employed in business. The first strategy is called market penetration. Market penetration is a strategy that consists in selling the same product to the same people. So you keep doing the same. So that strategy in itself is easy to define, because you're just going to keep selling the same product, but you will have different 4Ps, different tactics, different plans. What would be the changes that you could do in order to sell more of the same? What tactics could you have?
Running target ads to people that have already clicked on your stuff, as well as like sending email blasts to people who have already purchased your products.
That's right. So you increase your communication.
Yeah, correct.
So if you do, I don't know, one time per month, email, now you do 2 times per month email. So you increase your communication. If you do 1 ad in 1 newspaper, now you do 2 ads in 1 newspaper, or 2 newspaper ads. Exactly. So that's correct. So market penetration is same product, same people, but you increase the 4 Ps, or you decrease the prices as well. So more activities, maybe some limited edition product with less price or something like that. So you try to stimulate them. Product development will be a variation of the product, and it's a significant variation. It has to be pretty significant to require to be named a product development. So if you're doing a yogurt and then you do a vanilla yogurt, that could still be considered market penetration because it's not significantly seen different. But if you do a low sugar yogurt, you know, or what could you do? No, what's inside the milk? I forgot the name of what's inside.
Dairy,
No, inside the milk.
lactose.
Yeah, lactose. So if you do a lactose-free, thank you. If you do a lactose-free yogurt, that could be a new product development because people may just say, no, I don't want that. It's too different. So there is no strict definition of what's a new product development, but there's just a common sense that says how much have you changed. If it's significant, it's product development. If it's a small, not that significant, it's just a product line extension. So product line extension as just a small variation can still be considered market penetration. So if you're doing a 200 milliliter bottle of Coke, and now you're going to a 600 milliliter and to a 800 milliliter and to a liter on all of this, that's likely to be just a packaging change. And if it's a packaging change, that could still be considered market penetration. But as you change the packaging, and that's what we saw with the wine example I showed you before, where they went with the aluminum can, this time it's not a market penetration, it's a product development because the product by the consumer is considered very, very different. And in fact, how do you know that? Because they may be buying just one and then buying another one at another time, or buying both, but for different reasons. Market development is when the product really stays very close to being the same, but it's not meant to be for the same consumers. And then the last one, so market development is if you're selling for men and now you're selling for women, or you're selling for older people and now you're selling for younger people. It's like Facebook was for young people, and then Facebook became for older people. So they did market development where they expanded who the product was meant to be used by. Diversification is when it's a significant different product for a significant different group of consumers. And what I mean by significant is it's like a different market. It's a different product category. So it's McDonald's selling, I don't know, ski boots. You know, that would be not what they're known for. So diversification is a significant change. So sometimes, in fact, I think most of the time, strategies are not just one. It's a combination. So, I mean, Coca-Cola is making Diet Coke. Diet Coke is not just a new product, but it's also for a new group of consumers. So Diet Coke has two strategies embedded, and they're not mutually exclusive, or one does not cancel the other. It's just that Diet Coke is a new product because it's significantly different product, and it has required to be developed as a new product, and it goes after a different group of people. So if you hear that it's a new product, plus it goes to a different group of people, why don't you call it diversification? well, I don't call it diversification. I actually state two different strategies, because if it was diversification, it would be Coca-Cola making
Cars.
cars, yeah, air spray, you know, and that would be very much diversification. So thank you, Laura. Does that make sense? Any question on this four? You should not get that would, I mean, there's typical questions that you'll see in the quiz, and you just need to know what they are. Obviously, you need to know what they are because you want to do well at the quiz, but you want to know what they are because it's good to know some of that jargon. So when you talk to other business people, you can tell them, oh, so are we doing market penetration or product development? And then people take you seriously because they can tell that you know strategies. I mean, the basic strategies. There's 100 strategies and there's 4 that do 60%. You may as well learn these 4 because they're going to serve you. Also, you need to learn them because you're going to have to state what you're going to use for Alex Ritchie as well. But these are not the only one. There's 4 additional strategies which are called Porter's strategies. So Porter is also a very famous professor, and he talks about strategy, one of his specialty. And here he has this basic competitive strategy. So one is called overall cost leadership. Overall cost leadership is a strategy where it's very simple. It's to be the cheapest product within the category, constantly have a price advantage. So it's easy to implement. It's easy to figure out. But the problem with this is it puts you in a position where someone can beat you. And also for most businesses, trying to be the cheapest makes you have low margin. And if you have low margin, you can't innovate. So it's a strategy that eventually will reduce your resources and eventually put you in a dangerous position, because if something goes bad, if there's a pandemic and for 2 or 3 months you're not making any money because you had the overall cost leadership, you don't have that much money to survive, so you have to close. So sort of short term, sort of risky, hard to stay competitive, and so forth. Now the focus strategy is when you try to be much more specialized for a specific group of customers. So it's also called the niche strategy. Niche strategy or focus strategy is the same thing. So you can use one word or the other. It's a specific product for a specific group of customers, and not everyone will see that this product belongs to them. But the people that, so it's like Patagonia, Nike versus Patagonia, or Nike or Under Armour versus Patagonia. Patagonia is not for everybody, and so it's a specific brand. I think the brand that deal with skateboarders, for example, it's like if you're a skateboarder, you're gonna like that brand, but other people wouldn't know. It's not Adidas. Adidas is a broad mainstream brand. So focus will be, like I don't know, Volcom or Hurley, or some specific brand of clothing like this will work. Differentiation is when it's not the outcome of differentiation is focus in a way, because what the company tries to do is to be very different in the way it is set up. So it's not the case anymore, but Apple used to be a differentiation. Apple used to be, well, in fact, that was their slogan, think different. It was this brand for the people that wanted something to be more unique, to be more special, to be more for like an elite or a group of people who knows about the product. And so differentiation, so here I actually have a example with Leica cameras, so you don't buy a Nikon or a Canon. I mean, these are good cameras, but you buy a Leica. So it's not just a camera that everybody knows, or Hasselblad, or a Rollet, or something like this. These will be strong in differentiation because they would be for professionals or for very serious amateurs that would want the brand that is not for everyone. Then the middle of the road is you will be sort of trying to please the masses. You're not going to be focused nor differentiated. You're going to be something that is not anyone's favorite, but nobody hates it. And so you take a middle of the road position, and that's a strategy. Any question on this? Strategies? No. Okay. So the next two, they have to do with so the first one and second one more of a service-oriented type of strategy. So operational excellence is how people get to be delivered satisfaction. So they tend to be more like services. So operational excellence is where the example that is true for everyone is that you could print your ticket yourself. So they found a way. Then you could get the app, and you don't have to print the ticket. You don't have to get the ticket. Now it's the app. So it's like a minimum of friction. Everything is smooth and easy. Little friction. You press on the app, you put the destination, you get the ticket. The ticket is already in your box, and then you use this in order to get into the plane and all this. Operational excellence is important for services. I just say an airline company, but it's important for a bank as well. To limit the difficulties in being served. Operational excellence maybe for ordering food. It's like you call, they recognize your number, they say you got this order last time, you want the same, you want something different, you say the same. If you buy the same, we give you a free cookie or something like this. So people like businesses that are where everything is smooth and there's no surprises. That's a strategy that is very important. Customer intimacy is this strategy that says that you can have the best relationship with your customer as possible. Your customers are going to be your best marketing. The more they buy your product, the more you reward them. The more they buy your product, the more you invite them, and they become part of a fan base. And this fan base is what makes your company strong, because they tell their friends and they tell their friends and they advocate about your company. And so for them to get something is they need to give you. And what they give you is not just the fact that they buy, so give you money, obviously, but what they give you more than other companies is they give you their trust. And part of this trust is manifested in them giving you data. So they tell you their birthday, they tell you their favorite product, they tell you what they think, they share information, and they share private information, and this private information may be under some kind of club. And maybe then they get special offers of products and all this. You get preferential prices, or maybe they make limited edition and only the people who are part of this club can get this limited edition, or they get products that are going to be sold, and obviously they're only going to sell it to the members of the club first, even though it's not limited edition, but the members of the clubs will be the first one to be allowed to buy it, and then it will go to the general population. So customer intimacy has been growing tremendously because of the fact that now we can interact more with consumers through digital marketing, through the mobile phone and all this. And it has grown tremendously because businesses have seen that being kind to your customer is more than just the right thing to do. It also makes your company more profitable. Why does it make your company more profitable to be kind to your customers? Anyone knows?
Because you can go anywhere.
Is it because of word of mouth?
Yes, it's because of word of mouth. What does word of mouth do?
It creates a community of people with like-minded interests.
Yes, but what does that do?
Gain
It
trust.
makes people want to buy the product more.
So that makes repeat purchase. Yes. And what it does is it increase satisfaction. And what it does is increase word of mouth. And because there's more word of mouth, there's less marketing. And therefore you spend less in marketing, or your marketing become more efficient. Therefore you increase your margin. So do you increase your margin right away? No, you don't. But you increase your margin once the momentum goes and those people are doing the word of mouth. Then you see it's an instant increase. So like, let's say you spend 1 million of advertising and you get $10 million sales. And then you spend 1.5 million, and now you should get 15 million sales. And then you realize that you get 12 million sales. But then you start getting customer intimacy, which is that you develop this relationship, and there's word of mouth. And suddenly your sales now go to 20 million. So it's exponential with the intimacy, but it's not exponential with the advertising as much. Because the problem with advertising is there's a point where the advertising doesn't do anything anymore, where it saturates. And in fact, there's some theory that says that advertising can actually go against you, that too much advertising can actually reduce your sales. But there's not such a thing for word of mouth. Too much word of mouth doesn't reduce your sales. It's like too much word of mouth is it's Amazon, too much word of mouth, right? So it doesn't reduce anyone's sales. On the contrary, it just multiplies. So customer intimacy is very powerful. Anyone wants to add something? I didn't want to cut anyone's.
Oh, well,
yeah.
I was mentioning earlier, like you can go anywhere. So when you get treated properly, you basically hit it on the head with the word of mouth. You get treated properly at a place, you are satisfied, you have a really good experience, you're going to tell people that you know about, when people like your significant other ask you about your day, like even from that, you are spreading the word about your experience at a particular place that you go to.
That's correct. Thank you. And so from what you said, that made me think, because there's many things that I could add, but I have to look for the time. But in customer intimacy, and so you don't do customer intimacy for what I'm going to say now, which is it helps you when you screw up. So if you don't do customer intimacy, so you can screw up. But what happens is when you have a good strategy of customer intimacy, and this is something that you're good at, in case you happen to screw up, which is something that happens always, but you don't want, it really reduces the impacts of your screw ups, because people are in a relationship with your business. When you make a mistake, they don't take it as bad because they know it's just a mistake. It's like when you have a friend. When you have a friend, you do a mistake. If it's a good friend, if you're good friends, they don't hold it against you for that mistake. But when it's someone that you're not a friend, that you don't really know that well, and they make or you make a mistake, that stops the relationship because they are not in a relationship with you. So they're thinking that's what you're going to do continuously, right? I mean, like your brother and sister and family, it's impossible not to ever had a fight, but that fight is part of the process of being together because now everybody agrees all the time. So people do the same thing with businesses. Is when they are in this developed relationship, it allows the relationship to go through some bad times because it's not held against the business as much as if it was not in a relationship. People still are upset, but it doesn't affect as much. Product leadership, this one I can explain very quickly and simply, is when you want to have the most innovative product, like sort of the best product. The product which is considered to be the most advanced, which is considered to be the stereotype product in this category. Okay, so product leadership, The problem with that is you it's expensive to have product leadership because you constantly need to have a strategy that goes with this, which is called the innovation strategy. And innovation strategy require research and development, so it means that you have to constantly spend a lot of money in research and development, and not all innovation becomes successful. And sometimes they are, and therefore you have to capitalize on it and make the most money out of it. But sometimes they are not, and therefore you lose a lot of money. And sometimes they are great products, but you are copied very fast, so you don't capitalize with the momentum for the time that you had ahead of everybody else. Sometimes you have the time, sometimes there's not a lot of times, and sometimes there's some companies whose strategy, and so that's the one that come here, is about this being this follower. You see the third one, the yellow one? Market follower is very much the strategy that consists in not being the product leader, and in fact is to just try to learn from those companies who are leading. And so they are like the they just bandwagon type of marketing strategies. Just let them make the momentum, and we'll come and we'll just do a little copy, a little tweak that will allow us not to have spent the money to develop all of this, but to just to harvest for what's existing. Market leader is different than the product leadership. Market leader is you want to have the largest market share. So product leadership is you have the #1 rated product by JD Power and Associates, #1 rated product by the Grammys. Then that's product leadership. Market leader is the one that has the biggest share of the market. Market challenger is the company usually that's almost as big or half as big and happens to be the #2. So the market challenger will use the momentum created by the market leader. And because of their size, they may be the #2 company in an industry, may be half the size of a #1. And what they do is they take advantage that the fact that the #1 is sort of slow to respond because they're so big, having such a market share. So it's it's like it's Walmart versus Ralph's, for example. It's smaller, so they can react much faster. And then the market nicher is the one, same thing, but it's from a different school of strategy definition, but it's the same thing as the focus. So a market nicher and a focus is the same. Do you have any questions? Okay. Market share, challenger follows the biggest one, follower follows the challenger and the leader, and is essentially just launching the product a year, 2 years, 3 years after. And market nicher is someone that focuses just on a specific customer. And so Alex Ritchie, he can't be the challenger, at least right now. He could be a market follower, but the problem with the market follower is, I don't think much is going to happen, because it's going to be about being known by everyone and being like a more affordable version. I don't see why people would want to do that. So he's more likely to be a market nicher, at least at the beginning. To be everything to everyone is not possible, but to be everything for a small group of people that converts into a larger group of people, which convert again into a much larger group of people within a period of time, that is very good. So now, just because I like for you to understand everything, is this slide, yellow slide, and that slide is exactly the same thing. This and this are the same, but it's for different people. This is the word and this is the image, but it's explaining the same thing. So if I look at the image, I'd say there's 3 levels, like 3 drawer. There's A1, A11. So it's like a subcomponent. So you have the strategies and you have the tactics. I've said that many times, even today. But just to confuse you a little bit, there's something in between. So how could there be something in between? What happens is there's the strategies, and then there's the sub-strategies. So the sub-strategies are the strategies for each one of the P, each one of the 4 Ps. So now let me go back to this. So this is just what I've explained. So you have a business which has an objective here. This objective will be fulfilled by the corporate strategies. The standard corporate strategies are market penetration, new product development, market development, diversification, but also market nicher, market follower, market challenger, customer intimacy, overall cost leadership, focus, middle of the road. All right, all of these are the big strategies. And then these are fulfilled themselves by the tactics, which are the 4 Ps, you see, product, price, place, promotion. But these also have their own objectives. So then you have a company objectives, okay? And under the company objective, you have the objective for each one of the P. And therefore, you have also a strategy for each one of the P. So if I tell you sub-strategy, therefore, that's a strategy for the P section. Or if I tell you price strategy, that means it's sub-strategy for the price. So you have to see it as an umbrella. Strategy, sub-strategy. How many sub-strategy do we have? Well, we're going to have at least one for each one of the P, since there's 4. So how many corporate strategy a company has? What's the minimum? 1. What's the maximum? I don't know. It's a combination. So if you have too many combination, then it's a mess. But it could be 2, 3, 4, 5. How many sub-strategy do they have? At least 4, because there's 4 Ps. Okay. Do you have any questions? So inside here, this slide is like this slide is a summary of what I could show you on the last day of class. But I didn't want to do this because I want you to understand how it works. So this product strategy will be one class. We'll have a session for each one of these. And I will discuss each of the sub-strategies that are underneath. So this is a summary of what you will know by the end of this class. Right now, we've covered the first box till now. After that, we'll be moving to the next box. Any questions?
I had a question.
Yes.
So earlier you mentioned market penetration, and you talked about what you would do if you wanted to kind of increase it, and you said potentially like increasing emails.
Yes.
Now, right now, wouldn't like don't text have like a better? I know you're just kind of using like an example right there, but do text messages have a better market penetration than emails? Or
yes?
Okay, all right. I was just checking. Like I was just kind of curious for right now.
Yeah. So text messages have a much better penetration than emails. Emails is pathetic compared to text. Correct.
Is it kind of saturated? Like it used to be like a more effective market penetration, but now
yes. And it just evolves. In 5 years, the texts are going to be terrible, and something is going to replace it. So what you're talking about right now, this is a sub-strategy which goes in promotion. But then inside the promotion, it goes into direct marketing, which is text. Text is a part of direct marketing. So here it's going to say our strategy is market penetration. We want to sell the same video music to the same people. We just want to increase the number that we sell. To do this, we're going to use the sub-strategy of direct marketing. In direct marketing, we're going to have some email marketing and some text marketing. So what is the name of your sub-promotion? Direct marketing sub-strategy. What is the specific detailed action is increase email and text, right? So it's a question of being organized. The bigger is market penetration, the smaller is promotion, the smaller is direct marketing, and the smaller is more text. So it goes, it's like a funnel. It goes into more details, like a pyramid. Did I answer a little bit your question?
Yeah, I think so. It's like kind of like counter strategies along the way, depending on performance of your marketing.
They're not counter, they are connected.
Like if it doesn't work, or like, is it just like you kind of plan it out this way regardless, not like if, you know, something's ineffective, you kind of change it and
Oh,
adapt?
no. Yeah, I see what you're saying. These are called contingent strategies. And I haven't explained that yet. Okay, what can I tell you? Imagine a boat. Inside the boat, you have an admiral, which is like the biggest, most important person. And then you have a captain. And after that, you have a lieutenant. And in fact, you may have one admiral, 5 captain, 25 lieutenant, right? And then 100 surgeons, and then 1,000, I don't know how you call it in English, to be honest, but like Marines. Do you follow that? What those 1,000 Marines do is what the surgeon told them. What the surgeon do is what the lieutenant told them. What the lieutenant do is what the captain told them. What the captain do is what the admiral told them, right?
It's like a hierarchy of authority or direction.
Hierarchy of authority, it's a hierarchy of direction. So when you do a marketing plan, it's the same. Is you have an objective, that's the admiral, which is defined to reach that objective, you need to think of a direction, a big direction, the broader thing. And the broader thing is called the strategy. So the strategy, there's 100 strategy, but I taught you 4 that cover 60% of the case scenario, which is market penetration, new product development, and the next 2. That's the 4 that covers not 100%, but 60%. So then let's imagine you say, we want to increase our profit by 12% in the next 2 years. That's the objective. How do you do that? You can do market penetration that consists in selling more product to the same people. What would be what the surgeon do? The surgeon is one of them, because there's one that is on the deck, one that is in the engine, another one that is at the cannon, another one that is on the supply, right? So what you have is you don't have supply, cannon, deck, engine. You have product, price, place, promotion. So the surgeon who is in charge of the promotion is going to say, hey, to help market penetration at my level, which is a lower level, my objective for my promotion objective is to increase the number of promotion activities by 12% as well, to increase the sales by 12%. Usually they're connected, and then you say, so to do that, I'm going to do direct marketing. And then you give it to someone else, smaller than the surgeon, which is the guy that's going to be going on his computer, sending things, coding things, right? So you have an army of people. And so that's what this tells you, is you define the plan, then the plan is disseminated to the different people in the business at the different level who knows what they're supposed to do based on the activities that they're supposed to do. So that's why I say this one slide is a slide that summarizes the whole picture that I'm going to try to teach you in this class for you to understand the order of things and how it trickled down. It's like the trickle down. Does that make more sense? I don't see you anymore, but
Yeah, that makes absolute sense. Thank you.
okay, wonderful. So this slide is a slide that I created myself because it's nowhere to be found. I just created this slide because it's a one slide that says everything. But it's a one slide that is a little bit difficult for you to digest now because we haven't done product, price, place, promotion. But what we did is if you look at the slide, you have two red titles. You have one corporate marketing plans and two marketing plans. So to this moment, right now at 7:42 on the 16th of February, you know the first red section, the corporate marketing plans. After this, we'll be moving into marketing plans, so the detail that will go inside on how to implement. So there's the part which is more the direction definition, and then the other part which is more the implementation, detail explanation. But those two parts have to work together because there's the high executive level decision making and there's the lower level decision making. So what this slide is doing is just explaining what I'm saying right now is you have high level decision making that feeds into lower level decision makings. Top managers think about the goals, division managers, the strategies, and field managers, the tactics, and it feeds this way. And they all contribute to the big picture the best way that they can, okay? So part of the analysis is obviously to look at your portfolio. In the case of Alex Ritchie, there's no portfolio, but every existing business has a set of products or services they've been selling, and then you can look at them in terms of the amount of market share that they have and the amount of growth. So high growth, high market share is a star. High market share, low growth is a question mark. Sorry, a low market share, high growth is a question mark. A low market share, low growth is a cash cow, and the low market share and low growth is a dog. So what you do is you divest from the dogs. The dogs, well, the question mark, the problem you have is you're not selling enough. So you need to sell more question mark so that way you can go into a star. The cash cow is usually because this product used to be a star. Why is it now a cash cow? Is because there's less demand in the market. How can you revive demand? It is possible that you cannot revive demand. It's possible that you can revive demand by expanding the market. So it used to be sold in California, now you sell it also in Nevada and Arizona, and then you can make this cash cow become again a star or question mark. Or it's possible that it's declining and eventually this cash cow will become a dog. Normally the dog, the question there that you have is, do we get rid of the dog? Because it's not going to go anywhere and it may start to cost us more money than anything else. So, all right, so I think I'd go to the net takeaway. The net takeaway so far is you have to understand the concept of satisfaction and the difference between satisfaction and value. Satisfaction is at the moment of consumption versus value is prior to the purchase or while you are purchasing. Relationship marketing is important because it increases repetition, it increases satisfaction, it increases profit, it decreases the need for marketing, and it creates a long-term growth for the company. Then you have those 3 bullet points of the sets of strategies that you need to learn, the ends of, which is the most important strategies, I think, because they cover so many situations. But now, more specific strategies, you have the porters, and then you have the basic competitive strategies. And then finally, you have benchmarking, which is the idea that you need to analyze your competitors. How do you analyze the competitors? I talked about this last time. And so I refer to this slide, which I believe is inside your study guide. Is this slide very important for you to study and memorize by heart? For the quiz, no, you don't have to. In fact, for the quiz, you have access to this slide, so it's not an issue. But why is this slide important? Because you want to use these slides for your own competitive analysis when you're looking at potential competitors for Alex Ritchie. It's a very good slide, which I recommend that you keep on the side because there's 99% chance that you will want to look at it again in the next 2 years, if not sooner. If you haven't, I have a number of students every semester that says, oh, I remember there was a student, it was last semester or something, he told me that he was already starting to use this stuff and he got promoted in his current job. Oh yeah. I mean, these things is stuff that you don't find in textbook, stuff that you can't find on Google. These are my own little private secret recipe for doing consulting. And I did consulting for the top 5 biggest consulting firm. And I was doing this even when I was 21 years old. So it's been a while. And so they work. And I'm just passing to the students. So we're done with this portion. Now we're jumping in consumer behavior. So why would anyone, do you have any question on strategy before I move on? No. So why do you study consumer behavior? Well, because you want to understand your consumers, number one. You always try to understand your consumer, but then you want to study the concepts behind consumer behavior so you can understand them better. But more important than understanding them is you want to predict based on what they are doing right now, what they're going to do next. But you also want to anticipate, which means that you want to do things that you know what they're gonna do next. So you also want to do the simple thing that are so obvious, which is you want to measure their satisfaction and measure what do they see as value. And then consumer behavior is about asking a lot of questions. Questions such as if they buy, what they buy, how they buy, when they buy, where they buy, how much they buy, and that I didn't put here, what's missing? What is the most important, most difficult question, which I didn't put? That's the XXXX something they buy. What's missing?
Is it why?
Why exactly? Thank you. Who's that?
Brian.
Brian. Okay, yes,
Yeah.
Brian. See, it's what it's why. Why is the most important? Why is the most difficult question to ask? If you don't mind, Brian, why do you think why is the most difficult question?
Maybe because there's so many factors to consider.
Because there's many factors, that's correct. That's one of the 2 big reasons. There's another big reason, which is very obvious once you hear what it is, but people don't think about it right away for some reason.
Because why is subjective where the others are more objective?
Yeah, because there's an issue with the objectivity. And so the issue is that people don't even know why most of the time. So when you ask people why do they buy something, I would say 75% of the time, the reason they will tell you why do they buy is not the real reason. In fact, let me give you an example. If you ask people, why do you go to the gym? They tell you what? They say, I go to the gym to be healthy. Okay. You ask another 100 people, why do you go to the gym? They tell you to stay young. Then you ask another 100 people, why you go to the gym? To lose weight. Then you ask another 100 people to lose weight. Then you ask another 100 people to stay healthy, another 100 people to lose weight. So that's the typical answer. But then what you do is you take them on the side in a separate room. You talk about what they like to do in life. They become comfortable. And you get the light a little down. And then you talk to them and you say, why do you go to the gym? What do they say? They don't say anymore to lose weight, to stay healthy and stay young. What do they say? Now that they have a little bit of time to think about it. They say because they want a 6-pack. And then you say, okay, but why do you want to have a 6-pack? So why do they want to have a 6-pack?
To show it off.
Why do they want to show it off?
For vanity.
Okay, so you see, we could go like this for long. I'm going to go quick. It's for sex. For more sex.
Straight to the point.
Straight to the point. More sex, more power, more money, more prestige. That's why. So then when you ask people, why do you go to the gym? Never someone's going to say it's very obvious. It's for sex and prestige. Nobody says that. But when you keep asking the question and they become comfortable and they open up, that's what they say. So people don't even know why they do things. They just do things. They figure they don't. It takes a long time to figure things out, and so they don't know. So why is hard to ask people the question why? Because there's many reasons. But worse than that, they don't even know why. It takes a lot of research. So it's the hardest one because there is what's called the black box. What's the black box? Normally, the black box is very famous, unfortunately, because every time there's a plane that crash, they look for the black box. And what they're looking for the black box, because that's what's going to be the record of what happened before the plane crash. And based on what the black box says, then they know what happens to the plane most of the time. If the plane falls in the middle of the ocean, what happens is they never find the black box and we never know what happened. So people have a black box. You have a black box, I have a black box, which is that we do things we don't even know why. We receive information and then we do things. So how does the black box work? Like this. There's input, process, and output. Input is we receive information, process is we think about it, output is we make a response. What are the characteristics, the main characteristic of consumer behavior? Cultural, which is where are you from? Which ethnicity, which subculture do you belong to, which social class? So social class, you know, culture, you know, but subculture is not just that you are African American or Asian American. It's also the subculture of, like, for example, you probably like a specific music genre. So maybe you are like a electronic music, or maybe you're hip hop, or maybe you're a reggaeton person. That's a subculture. Maybe you play golf. That's a subculture. Maybe you do video games. I don't know what subculture you belong to, but there's lots of subcultures. And these subcultures, which are hobbies as well, are very important. The social influence is the second most important, which is which reference group you belong to. So you belong to probably maybe some a music instrument, um, maybe students, maybe you have a position in as a job and all that. The family, so if you have a brother, a sister, a son, or daughter, and so forth, the role that you play, maybe you have some leadership and status in some area, right? And then the personal elements are based on your age, if you have a relationship, if you have kids, the job you have, if you have savings, if you have very specific hobbies, so therefore that reconnects with the subcultures, it's connected, associated, but also as a person, your personality. Then there's psychological elements, which is why you do things based on a different level of motivation, small motivation, big motivation. The perception of things is how do you see things? Are they important, less important? Are they something that you want to memorize, not memorize? Do you see it as it is, or do you have a bias? Learning is how much experience you have. If you have experience, you have previous knowledge. And therefore, when you make decision based on what you're hearing now, but also what you know, or you think you know. And that makes you make different decisions. But also your beliefs and attitudes, which are related back to personal, social, and cultural. Let me ask you a question right now. Which one of all of these do you think has the biggest impact on people's decision making?
Culture.
Culture, exactly. Your culture is the number one thing that explains 85% of what you do. So if you ask someone why, the why is better explained by the culture. And your culture is very explained by your parents. You are a replication of your parents and you can't help it. And so your parents have a strong impact, and your culture through your parents has a huge impact. So culture is the most prominent because it's the values, it's these beliefs, it's the what's expected, what are the norms. You know, we are all programmed, we are all wired to do certain things in certain situations. So, So let me show you this. This is something I just saw this month. As predictions and recommendation engines become more accurate, businesses redefine their business model. Amazon's famous recommendation engines are estimated to account for about 30% of sales. In some book, there's some author that says that they have filed a new patent for a shipping system to cut delivery times by more accurately predicting what buyers are going to buy well before they buy it. The objective is for Amazon data and algorithm to get to know customers so well, and for the algorithm to become so accurate at prediction that they anticipate what customer want before customer even know it themselves, or before even they buy. Amazon will transform the business model from shop then ship to ship then shop. Can you imagine right now that there's something that is being prepared to be shipped to you? You haven't bought it already, but Amazon just know that you're going to buy it before you even know. Brands which pride itself on delivering the optimal customer experience cannot afford to be left in the dust on prediction and recommendation engine mastery, which is the shop then ship. The industry must use earn consumer trust to gain privileged access to the highest grade of customer data and insight to hyper-personalize for each customer. This is the new definition of a customer experience. Aren't you blown away by this? That means that companies right now, they know everything about you, what you like, what you smell, all of these things. They know what you think, but they know what you think before even you think it. So it's like they anticipate what you will buy right now. It's like they are creating search engines that know what you're going to buy in a week. You don't even know what you're going to buy in a week, but Amazon knows. This is the world we're living in right now. So obviously consumer behavior was about predicting, and it's about more and more predicting. So what you use to predict is you use all of these: the analysis of the customer, and the customer intimacy, and the customer data management, and the customer, the cookies on your phone, on your computer, and all of this is to help them better understand and predict and anticipate before you can even anticipate. So okay, so um, your generation is important because it has some incidence on how you think. But if you're married, not married, if you have a relationship, if you have kids, all of this has an influence on how you will consume. Businesses have known this for a very long time. Okay, so I've explained a lot of these. I want to explain, yeah, well, this one is the one everybody knows because it's so obvious, but I want to bring it back again. Is your behavior and what you're going to buy is still very much explained by the job that you have and the income that you receive. So your income and your occupation have a very important part. So you could say, I mean, I was blown away on campus because I would look around, and somehow sometimes I felt like the parking lot, the student parking lot, had better cars than the faculty parking lot. I mean, you look at the students parking lot, BMW, 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 and then you look at the faculty parking lot, Toyota, Toyota, Toyota. And I was thinking, that's very interesting. So income doesn't explain everything. It's also lifestyle, activities, interests, opinions. And so when what was strange to me is because sometimes students said, "Oh, professor, your textbook is $5. I can't afford it." And then I was like, they complain that my textbook is $5 or $10, but yet they all have a BMW. How does that work? Because it's people consume not just on their income, they also consume based on their lifestyle and what do they want. So lifestyle and occupation are two explanations how people consume. So what would be more true? Maybe their social class. Social class is an explanation as well. So some people have not a big income, but they're wealthy, and they may be in a family of wealthy people. So their income is not very high, but their family revenue or wealth is high, and therefore they consume the same way as the family. So it's like income zero drives the BMW. I was like, okay, that explains it. So all of this has to be into account. It's multifaceted. So what are psychographics? Psychographics are the elements that explain the person in terms of their age, their gender, their where do they live, their income, and also some traits of personality. So what are the traits of personality? I think we all wish to say that 90%, 50% of the decisions that we make are based on our personality, when in fact, our personality explains, 10, 15% of what we buy. Most of the explanation comes from our culture, so the personality is very small, but it does play a role. So what are the best elements of people personality that you can measure quantitatively and that you can derive some explanation? They're called traits, specific personality traits. So some people like what is new more than what is old, and vice versa. So you can measure people innovativeness, and based on people index of innovativeness, you can figure out what they're going to buy. Ethnocentrism is the same. Ethnocentrism is someone that would say, I'm French and everything that is made in France is better. I'm American and everything that is made in America is better. Therefore, I don't buy Chinese, Mexican, Canadian, German, Italian, because I'm not from this country. Ethnocentrism is also an index that goes from some ethnocentrism to large amount of ethnocentrism, okay? And so that also helps as from a personality perspective to understand people's behavior. It may work. It's, again, for the most part, a very small proportion of why do people buy the personality. Self-concept is connected. It's this idea of your own opinion of yourself. So it's like someone's ego. So there's sort of the image and the identity and materialism, and we were talking earlier of the vanity that people may have. So people with more vanity will consume different than people who have a lower level of vanity, because for some people, their image, well, is the most important thing. But for some people, their perception of their self-image is either not so much something that they think very often, or it's something that they think very often, and they may see themselves as very high, and they are very high, or they may see themselves as much higher than they are, or that makes them consume a certain way, or they may see themselves as very low, and they want to improve their self-image through consumption, okay, by consuming conspicuous, expensive, prestigious brands in order to improve their self-image. So I was talking about motivation, and we'll talk about this, but the idea that motivations are important because that's what oftentimes generates the feeling of a need, and therefore a need that needs to be satisfied. A motive is the intensity of the motivation. The higher the motive, the more likely people will buy. So the simplest concept to explain this is Maslow hierarchy of needs. So these don't change. So I was saying earlier in this class, can you create needs? And the answer is you cannot create needs. Needs exist. How many needs do we have? We have 5 order of needs as created by a social psychologist, and one of them is Maslow. So Maslow said that the first one is physiological. You need to eat. Safety and security. You need to feel that you're not in danger. Social needs. You need to be part of a group. Ego needs is you need to have some kind of positive image, prestige in that group. And then self-actualization is not related to anyone else. It's personal, and it's this fact that you want to feel achievement. you want to feel some personal success, not in the society, but just for knowing that you know what you're doing, and that makes you feel good just for yourself. So physiological needs is you buying food, you're breathing. Safety needs is you buying insurance. Social needs is you buying what you think people think is the right thing to do. You're doing the right thing, so that way you don't stick out. Ego needs is you doing something that's slightly better or a lot better than what you think everyone is doing. You're stepping out of the standard. And self-actualization is based on your own criteria, independently of what everybody else is thinking. So now we're talking about this concept of perception, the fact that we look at information and we are sort of look and select and organize this information in order to interpret it and know if we should memorize it. How important is this? How soon do I need it? Should I keep it? Should I keep it in case? Should I need it right now and therefore try to process more information? The idea here is that our perception is filtering on what we agree, what we believe. We tend to look at it more and memorize it more. What we are interested right now. So we have a short-term memory for it and to process it. So we very much have selective retention, attention, and distortion, because we sort of processing everything around us, and there's so much to look at and so much to remember that we can't remember everything, and therefore this is a way to eliminate and just filter everything. The absolute threshold is the idea that when you are a business are doing things, is if you do it in a way that people don't get to perceive it, they won't memorize it or they won't process it. They're not going to make an effort on it. So there's a minimum. So here, to give you an example, is if you say this weekend Coca-Cola is 50% off at Ralph's, the perception here is if you drink Coca-Cola, this may be important. If you don't drink Coca-Cola, you're not going to memorize it, because what's a 50% for something you're not interested? That's what perception does. The absolute threshold is if you know every weekend Ralph says 50% for Coca-Cola, it's not meeting the absolute threshold. It's too low. But if you say 75, suddenly this is going to be a much bigger number, and there you are going to have the absolute threshold. The problem of the absolute threshold is therefore you need to know what it is, and you need to be careful not to do things too often, because otherwise that becomes the new threshold, and every time the absolute threshold will have to be raised from this. And that's the concept of sensory adaptation, the fact that people get used to what businesses are doing to them. That's why you have to create new products. Now, a concept that I'm very keen on, it's called the just noticeable difference. The just noticeable difference for me is it's not as important as the opportunity concept, which I've spent hours, several hours talking to you, but it's almost as important. So I want to make sure that you see that you pay attention to that one. The JND says that in order for a business to keep on growing, they're going to have always propose something that is just a little bit different, just a little bit better than what everybody does. So the idea is if you're too different, they won't buy you beside a small fringe of people. And if you're not different enough, they're not going to see the benefit of buying your product. Just to explain this, Adidas is the three-band brand. So let's say you say, oh, you know what? They like this design, so let's make a product with not three bands, because that's copyrighted and trademarked. So we're gonna do something else. So therefore, what are the choices? 2-band, 1-band, 4-band, 5-band, and therefore you try to understand what is the best compromise. Obviously, here he's thinking, if I do 2-band, it's less than Adidas, therefore it's going to be like a lesser than Adidas. If I do 4-band, it's one more band than Adidas, so it looks sort of like Adidas. It's just one more. So which one is going to be perceived as a just noticeable difference? And every time you do a product like this, is you have to bring something up. Is the JND anyway associated with Alex Ritchie, do you think? Is this
Yeah, it's mariachi.
yeah, the mariachi, everything. The JND is, I feel like saying, your best friend in order to do this project. This project, almost the title should be Alex Ritchie JND, you know? What is this difference? What is just noticeable difference? If you do it too big, it's going to be seen as too much. If you do it not different, it's never going to be seen, and it's going to be seen as, yeah, it's cool, you know, for an amateur, for the guy in the pub, it's pretty cool. But if you want him to succeed, what is the JND? That could be like the first. Remember, your presentation is a sale. First slide is what's Alex Ritchie JND. That I would see that, I would be blown away. Then I would grab the seat and go, wow, okay, that's brutal. That's sales. They're going, and then they say, okay, so the JND is the just noticeable difference. It's the minimum that we need to change in order for him to be noticed. But at the same time, we want to push the JND to his maximum because we don't want him to be just noticed. We want him to excel. So what is it that we need to do to the current Alex Ritchie to become the excelling Alex Ritchie? JND1, explanation. JND2, explanation. JND3, explanation. Why, why? Because, done. Right? That's a presentation. But then the exercise is to go big, strategic, corporate strategy, and at the same time, sub-strategy, and at the same time, the details, and be able to go like an accordion. The big ID, the small ID. The big ID, the small ID. Why? Because we did research. We asked people, look at this picture. This is so and so and so. This is mariachi. This is, and this is like a cocktail you're making. You're making your own recipe. You're making your own cocktail. You're playing with high-level stuff, low-level stuff, J&D, the opportunity, your research, what you find. It's super fun. If you like business, this is super fun. That's what they do in business. They create something. So they change, they adapt. All right. So just to finish this before we jump into the presentation, is the J&D, if you want. I wish you never forget this. But if you forget it, maybe you remember what I call the cherry on the cake. The J&D is the cherry on the cake. Same thing. This image is worth 1,000 words. So very quickly, here's Weetabix. This is a past client that I work with the students. Weetabix is unknown in America, is the #1 cereal in the United Kingdom for the past 80 years. Therefore, it's huge. All what you see here is a box of Weetabix. How much do they sell in America? Almost nothing. Terrible. Why? We think it's terrible because that's what they want in America. So if you go America, UK, UK, America, America, UK. What's the big difference? Big difference is here, there's a little cartoon. There's lots of colors. People don't even buy this to eat. They just, it's playful. Okay, so what are the trends? The trends is people run in the morning, they're rushing, they want to have breakfast while they walk and read their mail and do all of this. So what do they take? They take protein shakes, they take Ensure and vitamin D and all that. They take Go-Gurt. So then we say, what about Ensure plus Go-Gurt plus Weetabix? That's Go-Wito. Go-Wito is a Weetabix with the new Go-Wito man. The Go-Wito man becomes the little man, little cartoon, and Go-Wito is inside a little tube. It has cereal, so it's better than Ensure because there's the fiber inside. It's better than Go-Gurt because it has the fiber inside and the protein from the shake. And it's better than Weetabix because it has all of this all together. That's how you define a J&D. It's J&D for each one of these products. It's an addition, and obviously, you have to explain more research on more data and all of this. So the need recognition is therefore creating a threshold, creating an intensity for people to want an improvement or what they perceive. So again, it's an issue of perception, what they perceive to be better. Information search is based on the fact that there are things that are high involvement and low involvement. So usually products that are high involvement, they require a bigger sum of money, and they require more information in order to make a decision because there is a perceived risk which is higher. So the higher the perceived risk, the more people will go into information search. The less the experience, the more the people will go into searching for information. So if it's something that they've already purchased before and they feel they have enough information to make the decision, they may make the decision and buy, or they may go and try the product. So not everything can be tried, but it's always better when you can let people to try. So for example, my brand of cognac is not very famous, and so and that's a good reason because there's 200 brands of cognac and there's two that do over 90% of the business. So there's a big monopolistic situation. So people buy this brand because they are the most famous. They see it advertised everywhere, and that creates the just noticeable difference. The most advertised, the least advertised. And so they figure that the most advertised is the better brand, and they consume it. But sometimes they find out that there's another brand, and then they want to buy it. And in the case of my brand, for example, they will not buy it because when you go to a store, you have to buy the product, and they feel that there's a risk because I sell cognac. Cognac is not inexpensive, and therefore they won't take the risk of spending $50 for something that they can't taste and they don't know what it tastes. So I've noticed, for example, that I do very well in places where people can taste. If they can taste my cognac compared to the other cognac, the purchase rate is very, very high because there's recognition that there's other brands, supply of information in the location with people that are usually more knowledgeable that can answer to the consumers, opportunity to taste the product, and then purchase decision. And post-purchase behavior is, are they buying again? So sometimes people get excited, they buy something, and then they don't even consume it that much because they sort of forget about it. And there's no post-purchase because there's no real habit. So that's another thing that is very interesting in marketing is ritualization of the consumption. Ritualization of the consumption is what the makeup people are trying to do. Because they want you to use this cream, and once you use this cream, use that cream, and then when you use that cream, use that cream. So they want to try to ritualize the behavior, and so ritualization is very big. But not just ritualization, there's also acculturization, learning about your own culture and discovering the rights, and I think there's a lot of this in the United States, and sometimes you feel like you're just living in some kind of sector or something because there's Valentine, after Valentine there's the tax, and after the tax Cinco de Mayo, after Cinco de Mayo there's those party weekend. After this party weekend, there's the 4th of July. After the 4th of July, there is the 1st of September. After and then Halloween, and it's like a cycle, and it's just a machine that goes through this cycle. And sometimes you don't know, and it's more obvious if you're a foreigner of the U.S. because you see that this is very strong in the American culture to constantly culture everything and ritualize everything. And you also notice it because when you go back to your culture, you see that there is a push. For example, in France, there's a push for Halloween as well. And it's definitely not in the culture, but they are being pushed. And so if you see who is pushing it, Halloween is being pushed by American brands, American music, American food. So if you go to McDonald's during the Halloween week in America, you'll find all kinds of Halloween themes. So the little kids, they go to Halloween, to McDonald's. They're supposed to be rewarded for having done something and going to McDonald's. And while they are at McDonald's, they are being sort of explain the concept of Halloween, that they're getting candy and all of these different things. And so therefore, a kid cannot say no to this thing. This is like their dream happening, like food you can eat with your hand and all of that, and candy and all this. Why saying no? And then he goes and they do it, and their kids do it, and then it goes on and on and on. That's how you can change a culture, and that's how you can standardize also the world into a global platform. So this decision process is very connected to the type of product. So not every time you look for information, because sometimes there's impulsive decision making, and sometimes there's also heuristic, where people only use one criteria for making a decision. Is it the cheapest one? Is it the most famous one? So people can make quick decisions that way. There's 4 types of buying behavior. I won't go into much detail because I've already explained, depending if you're high involvement, low involvement. And so the less people know, the more differences there is, the more the decision making is complex. There are 5 groups of consumers, depending on when do they buy. So the first group of consumers are called the innovators. They are the people that will consume first. The innovators tend to be more educated, more curious, and tend to have a higher social class, higher income. And so sometimes that's true, and sometimes it's not so true. It's just that they are very fan of the subject matter. So you may be someone not with a lot of money, but you buy expensive headphones or expensive food or expensive video games or something like this, and you are not a real innovator in general, but you're an innovator just in a specific type of product. The next group is the early adopters. So they consume after a certain amount of people have consumed the product. So they're not the one that generate the interest like the innovator. You don't make money from the innovators. If you're a company and you focus on the innovators, you may be looking like putting a lot of resources on it and looking like you're wasting a lot. But the thing is, the innovators is like a spark. There's no fire if there's no spark, but the spark is not why you're running this business. You're running this business for the majority, the early and late majority. This is where you will be making most of the money. And then the laggards is the last group, is the people that are actually buying the product when once it's sort of being declining from the majority. So they're the people that are very skeptical about innovative products, and they only buy it once sort of everyone has been buying this. So the percentage that you see here, 2.5, 13.5, this is the percentage which is the official percentage that you see in every explanation of the adopter group category. However, these percentages are just illustration, and I will never ask you, what's the percentage of late majority in the adopter groups. You would have to remember this percentage. It's more interesting if you learn which one is first, which one is last, or which one comes after the late majority. What's the group before the late majority, the early majority? What is the first group of the adopter groups, the innovative? What's the last group called of the adopter groups, the laggards? So that's all you'll have to remember, and this is very important. Why would you want to learn about this? You want to learn about this because the theory is true like the practice, which is that if you're launching a new product, if you're launching a new musician, depending on your resources, but the less resources you have, the more this is true, is you're going to have to identify the innovators. So everyone should have
I had a quick question. I'm sorry.
Yes.
Do you need us to send our presentation or email you our presentation?
Yes, you can do that.
Okay. All
yes.
right. Thank you.
Thank you. So in your presentation for Alex Ritchie, should you have a slide that explains how you're going to start him and who are you going to focus on, and the fact that you're going to have to identify some innovators? Yes, I'm certain everybody's going to have to address that because he's first still starting, and even what is started needs to be modified. So now we just talked about consumer behavior. Now we're going to talk about business buyer behavior. So it's instead of a B2C, we're talking about a B2B. So what is the difference between the two is the B2B is even much larger in the world. There is 3 types of purchasing. There's the total new purchase, just a modification, or the straight rebuy. The big difference between the B2B and the B2C is that the B2B is much more structured and organized. There are people that play a role in the one that buys, the one that makes the order, the one that has the money, the one that will use the product. So in B2B, it's more formalized if you want. So this is the different stage of the information processing for a B2B, which is almost the same, as this one. What's the difference? This is a B2C, there's 5 stages, and what's the difference with here? There's a B2B and there's a little bit more stages. Why there's more stages is because it's more formalized. So it starts the same way and it ends the same way. But at the beginning, what you do is you formalize the need. So if you're a business, and obviously if you're IBM or NASA, it's very different than if you are a company that has 2 employees. If you're IBM and NASA and you're buying new computers, is you have to formally define what are the needs and what are the specifications. You may even go through a supply search, and then you may be reviewing proposal from the supplier and then go into the purchase. But it's about the same thing. So what do I want you to remember here is that the B2B has more stages, the B2B is more formalized, and the B2B has more people involved, not always, but more often, more people involved in the decision making, and that they start and finish the same way. Okay, so now talking about global markets, this idea of global market is very interesting because the world is obviously becoming global. So when you're a company now, you are more likely to be interested to grow not just in your domestic market in the US, but grow overseas because it's part of your strategy. Because of technology, you have the opportunity of not just selling through a physical distribution network, but you can use an online distribution network, and therefore the fact that your product may be available in many more places with the same amount of effort or very similar amount of effort is coming. So you're looking at the industry globally, you're looking at also growing your company using global resources. Before, you may be very local in your production and supply and very local in your distribution. Now you may also look at developing your product by getting supplies and different steps of the production from different places. So should you or not go abroad? Which market should you go to? And how should we get into these markets? And should we use people locally or should we bring our people there? Should we work 50-50? Should we start slow and grow big? Should we go big from the get-go? So there's all kinds of issues related to the fact that sometimes the opportunities are better overseas than they are. Maybe they started overseas and they're going to come here later, or maybe there's an issue of profits that you can make overseas more than here, so you're shifting. Maybe there's more customers overseas and therefore you want to try to sell domestically and overseas because that allows you to do some economies of scales, which means that you make more products, and make more products, the cost of making the product is going down. Maybe also you don't want to be a one-legged duck where you have all your eggs in one basket, but you want to spread the market share in different markets. Maybe because a lot of your competitors come from overseas, so you also want to be able to do what they do to you, which is sell on their market. Maybe because that way you learn about them better by being in their market, and you become stronger in your market by learning to do it in outside markets. Maybe because your customers are also moving, and it's better if you go overseas, so that way you can follow them. But before you make this decision, you have to understand the obstacles that you're going to face in going overseas. Companies sometimes don't have a very overseas culture, and it's wrong to assume that it's going to be the same. There may be differences in culture, in regulation, in the cost, in the laws, and you may not have the people in your company to help you to do that. So the process is you have no export activity, then you find someone that's going to be buying your product and selling your product overseas, and therefore you have nothing. It's just another customer. So you have a customer you are in Los Angeles, you have a customer in San Francisco, and a customer in New York, and a customer in London. It's just a customer, and you're not really treating it as if it's different market. Then you see there's some sales, and then you decide to create something more involving, maybe establish in that market to grow and and grow your sales, because you don't want to be depending on someone else doing it for you. And then you may even start thinking about having a full production overseas. So the idea is you want to start small and eventually become bigger and bigger and grow overseas, or do you want to instead of growing domestically quickly, you select some markets overseas. So you say, in the US, we don't want to be in 50 states. We're going to be in the top 5 cities in the US, 2 cities in Canada, 1 city in 5 countries in Europe. And so that's going to be the sprinkler effect. Is you're looking for just big cities, and they don't have to be just in the US, but big cities. Or your business from the get-go is going to be global, in the sense that you're thinking it's not an American business. It started in America, but our customers are everywhere in the world. And sometimes this is more true today, because someone that is creating clothing is not just for American, it's for a specific group of customers that are not just in the US, and you're trying to expand. So the process is to say, who do we go with first? Maybe the closest country, closest in geographically, maybe the closest culturally, so a country that speaks the same language. So when you go in this country, you can invest your money, or you can share the investment with someone else who is investing in this venture, or who is local and is going to take part of this venture. You could license as well, or you could directly or indirectly export. So these are your choices. So indirect exporting is when you're going to use someone locally who's going to be doing the job of being your subsidiary, if you want. So it's either someone who's like a wholesaler that's going to be there. It's going to be a wholesaler, therefore this company is going to buy the goods, store the goods, and sell the goods. Or they're going to be a broker, so it's someone that's going to represent you to the final customers, but they're not going to buy anything. So it's just an agent who goes see potential buyers and gets sales, and then what you produce is sold directly to these clients. And the broker is only someone that gets a commission. He gets a commission from you, or he gets a commission from a percentage of the sales. Then there's some cooperative organization. So it's some organization that will represent your product. They will make a commission, but you also have to pay them, or you have to pay a fee in order to be part of this cooperation. There's also some export management companies. So there are companies which are overseas, and what they do is they are sort of a platform in that company to represent you. And all of these have pros and cons. The pros and cons is the risk that each one of these are taking, the risk in buying the product, the risk of having inventory, the risk of the fact that you'll have a contract with them, which is going to be harder to break if they buy product versus if they don't buy product. There's a different timeline. There's different expenses. Some will have very little expenses, but you'll have very little control. Usually the one you have the most expenses are the one you have the most control. But you have more control, but you're still not in that market. So that's when you need to do a direct exporting. So direct exporting is when you decide to have maybe one of your employees that will be hired in order to go in that market. So they come and work in the US for a while, and then when you think it's the right time, then you send them to Germany, and then they represent you there. And this person may go back and forth. After they go back and forth for a while, maybe they settle in the country, and then they create the branch. And then once this branch is created, maybe not only they represent you there as a sales team, a local full-time sales team, but they become the distribution network. So they start doing wholesaling for your company there. the issue is an issue of the time things take. The time things take to have your own subsidiary and the amount of money is long. And so you may decide to go with local representative who you give some kind of license, for example. So it's a license to be the sole exclusive distributor of the product, or you give them some kind of ownership of the product or the brand within the territory. And so they sell the product, they have ownership of the brand. So they don't have ownership of the brand for the world, but just the territory that they represent. And therefore, this becomes valuable for them to represent well this brand, because eventually they can sell that license to someone else, that ownership to someone else. Sometimes, so that's good if you can afford it, but you can buy a local brand and then use the structure, the existing structure of that local brand in order to start growing your own domestic brand. So obviously, the going overseas allows you to sell more product, theoretically to sell more product, because you sell the domestic and now you're just expanding, and it allows to, I mean, that's the benefit, is you can expand much faster because you can take advantage of not only your domestic opportunities, but the other one, and you can save in producing more and having more customers and save on the overall cost. You can have a diminution of your marketing costs because your team in your domestic markets could be also sort of helping the team overseas, and the cost of that team is going to be also reduced by the fact that you have more customers that they're going to cover. You will have a bigger market, so you'll save on the expenses of your company, having just supporting more. So, but all of this has disadvantages. It's nice to have uniformity, but uniformity doesn't really work as well because the markets don't respond the same way. There's different consumers, there's different laws, there's different cultures, there's different habits. So oftentimes trying to do everything yourself makes it very difficult. So what you do is you look for similarities. What are the similarities between us and these markets? And then you try to look for developing overseas in the market that are the most similar. Similar in terms of technology, in terms of channel distribution, in terms of the way you do business, but also similar in terms of some deep cultural dimensions, such as, is it a individualist, collectivist culture? What about some kind of a hierarchy in the society where people are sort of equal versus unequal, the difference between men and women, the difference in terms of taking risks, buying things innovative. There's some cultures that are better and some cultures that are not good. I mean, I see the huge difference between the US and France. A lot of, for example, for the cognac in France is extremely traditional versus in America, you have both. You have tradition and innovation. So because I'm a smaller brand, I have to differentiate myself. And one of the things I do is I try to differentiate by being very innovative. So when I do this, and I do it in France, it doesn't, even all Europe altogether is about the same. It doesn't generate the same interest versus when I do some innovation in the US, it's much better received. So you probably, by having a new product, will have to make a lot of adaptations, changes of the product. So not only you may change some products, features to be better adapted to the new market, some of the functions and characteristics, but you may have to change the packaging. You may have to change the way you do promotions, the way you do prices, advertising. Sometimes you have to change the name because unfortunately in this market, the trademark was not secured, and you have to change the trademark because that trademark is already used. You may have to change the benefits even. So it's like it's the same product. So this vitamin water sold in the US, maybe they sell it based on the fact that you get energy versus in Germany is that it's going to help you with health. Versus in England, maybe it's because it's going to help you with diet and nutrition. So this product, you're not lying. It's just that this product does these three things, but you can't say three things to each market because people won't remember any. You can only say one. So you emphasize the characteristics, which is more beneficial in each market in order to get the product to be more successful. So lots of things that we've seen that had to adapt name of the product, composition of the product, advertising of the product, and so forth. So here's the packaging of Amazon. It's different. People are not going to go to a .com. They're going to go to a .co.uk because that's the terminology of an internet domain. You have to think about your prices as well. So that's a big issue. So even though there's different currency, people are very sensitive to the price, and sometimes you have to lower the price, and you are able to lower the price because the cost of selling the product is much lower. Or sometimes it's just the cultural things. When I sell my cognac in Asian countries, for example, the margin is much smaller. So in the US, they will do a markup of 0.5, which means that the product is going to be 50% more expensive. So I sell it to someone who sell it to someone else, that's going to be a 50%. If I look at the same transaction in Vietnam, it's going to be multiplied by 10% versus it's multiplied by 50% in the US, and it's multiplied by 80% in France, for example. So different price structure, but you have to make sure it's sort of stays consistent. Do you look at therefore the price being based on the market or based on the cost? You know, I always find this interesting when I go to Africa, for example. I go every year in Africa, and because in Africa sometimes you have to be careful what you drink, because the water can get you sick. So it's common practice to order Coca-Cola, for example. And what's interesting is that everywhere you go, it doesn't taste the same. Supposedly there's one formula, but I don't think so because it tastes different. And so you order this Coca-Cola, and then you're stupefied by sometimes the price being so cheap if you convert it into dollar, and you wonder how Coca-Cola could be making any money. Well, it's because the cost of running the business locally is much cheaper. So they've done a cost-based price. So different countries have different perception of what you think is important.